Welcome back to my channel, everyone. Welcome back to Niaita Book Reviews. Today we have a very special guest, and that is Melanie Santos, founder of niaitacollabs. Very excited to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I have been following Melanie for a while, and I reached out to her.
And I've been following you for a while.
This is true. It's been a mutual.
It's a mutual thing.
Fellowship.
I like that.
She kept talking about this book that changed her life. And if you know me, you know that I love books. So I snuck into her. She
slid into my DMs.
I definitely slid into the DMs, and then I got it.
I'm really not that easy, okay?
No, I put in some work. First, I asked you very specifically. I was like, should I email you? Because you're always talking about that. You're like,
Which is always
email
great.
me. So I was like, I have an idea. Should I email you? Should I pitch it to you here? You were like, email me. I said, okay, no problem. What's the email? In case they want to pitch you.
info@melaniesantos.co. Please do not DM me. It will go unanswered.
I thought about what I could bring to the table, right? Because this is what you should do when you collaborate. And I was like, listen, I want to host a buddy read. You're always talking about this book that changed your life. We can do a giveaway together. Would you like to do this with me? And you were super open to it. Yeah. And so here we are. We have at least 60 women reading this life-changing book, and it really is a life-changing book. And so the book that we're going to talk about today is A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson.
By the God, Marianne Williamson.
Who has also, as of whatever the date is today, put in her bid for presidency. She did do that. You know, if you're trying to read up on the presidential candidates as of 2019, Today we are going to talk to you about some of our favorite pieces of this book. And we're just going to jump into it. There's no way to cover it all, but we're just going to go into what hit home for us, what resonated, and how we were able to connect it with our personal journey. Right in the preface, one of the first things she says is, and I think about my dad for this part a lot too, because my dad is very religious and he loves philosophy. So she takes her first philosophy course and she's like, nah, God is a crutch. God is not for me.
Yeah, which is what most people think.
I love when she really talks about how God is not a crutch. A lot of people say that. God is not a crutch, but a teacher. And she gives all these analogies. Like if you want to be the best musician, or if you want to be the best cook, and Dave Ramsey comes in, he's like, let me teach you. Would you say no?
Exactly.
And so all he is a teacher of being your highest self, of enlightenment.
Right.
Not a crutch.
Yeah, I definitely resonated with that. So just full disclaimer, I read this book almost 4 years ago now, in 2016, when my now husband and I broke up for the last time.
Wait. So how many times?
Maybe like a few times a year for like 3.5 years, almost 4 years. Yeah, it was a very emotionally abusive relationship, both sides. So when we broke up for the last time, I knew that was it. And I needed something to reaffirm that I wasn't absolutely insane so I broke up with him and I was like, that's it. Like, I need to figure out who I am, which is like, so let me find myself. Like something that people always say, but I really meant it. Like I was lost in anxiety and depression and all the years of like abuse that I inflicted and that I took from him as well. So we had a miraculous thing happen to me, and Marianne Williamson was on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday, and it like miraculously recorded itself on my DVR. Never seen the show before. Wow. Asked everybody in my house. Nobody had ever seen the show either. So I watched it, and that's my first encounter with Marianne Williamson, and I was just like in awe about the way that she was talking about relationships. So of course, me being the obsessive Gemini, Sun, Cancer, Moon that I am, I looked her up on all fronts, and I bought like as many books as I could, and I read them all, and this was the first book that I read. So this is my first tattered copy with an inscription in the front that says, I bought myself this book at the start of the rest of my life. So rereading this now and reading things like the preface and reading like God is a crutch, I remember thinking, you know, oh my God, yeah. You know, the first time I read this in 2016. And now I have a totally different, like, I resonate with that in a totally different way because I know what she means. Like, I know wholeheartedly what she means because I have a different relationship with God because of the things that she writes in this book.
Right. And I think that is a very common phenomenon. And I don't know if this happened. I went away for school, and I find that a lot of people that went away to school. It was my first sense of freedom. Also, my first time as a woman of color, understanding. And I'm writing about this now, that religion was misused for a long time to oppress people. And so that was one of my number one. I was like, I'm not gonna use this religion that was put on me, right? And then also figuring out as a Dominican woman that I am a part of the African diaspora. Those two things together, that's when I was like, I'm good on your religion.
Yep.
You know, I'm good. I don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah, it's something that my husband said to me a lot when we were dating, and I'm like, but it's fine. Like, I was still trying to find a way to intertwine religion with spirituality, and it wasn't until I let go of the guilt and the shame that, like, it's okay. I don't have to go to church every day to connect with God. I don't have to pray the same way, you know, everybody else prays. So I feel like starting off with the preface, like, this book just created a sound foundation for me to create my own type of spirituality.
Right. And I do want to take a moment to jump on that, because you talked about meditation. And one of the quotes that I was looking at before we did this video, she talks about how meditation is just time spent listening in silence to God. And you know when you have one of those moments and it's just like, ding. Aha. I was taught how to pray.
Right.
Prayer is great. It's important. The main difference between prayer and meditation is prayer is talking, meditation is listening. Right. And because growing up, I grew up very conservative, so meditation was new age, right? Meditation, yoga,
it still is.
Harry Potter, let's not get started, right? None of that was allowed in my house. And in my mind, I'm like, wow, you're doing a disservice when all you're doing is, imagine any relationship. This is your relationship with God. When you're just talking. Exactly. Here's what I want. Thanks for this. Bye. And you're not listening.
Exactly.
And it's so necessary for a spiritual practice, because how do you get filled if you're not listening?
Exactly.
This entire book, the practice of love is a strength and not a weakness. And that's really big too.
Major.
That's like major key alert, right? The practice of love is a strength, not a weakness. And while we need it too, as women, we do need it. I also think this is a message that the men in our communities desperately need, right? So you gotta be hard, you can't be soft. Yeah. It's just like, nah, that's not, it's so toxic.
Yeah, super.
The book is divided into two parts. And the first part is principles, and the second part is practice. So I figure we'll start there. We'll start with some of the principles. Okay. And she starts talking about darkness, which I love to write. I love to write about darkness. Can we talk about darkness?
Yes.
What did Marianne Williamson say about darkness?
Many things.
Before we started,
I want to look at the same pages because there was things that I highlighted when I was deep in my darkness. Like, I'm already seeing one now. And there are things that I highlighted now, so I purposely highlighted them in different ways colors. So that I could see, you know, how my past self thought and how my current self thinks. So the first thing that I have highlighted on page 7 is hell has many mansions. And I'm like, oh God. Like, I remember. Say more. She restructured for me the idea of what heaven and hell is. Okay. So coming from, you know, years of Catholic school, I was in Catholic school from age 3 to 15. It's a long time. Right. So my concept of hell is like, and my concept of like the devil go hand in hand, and like an evil force who gets you to do bad things. And heaven is a place that you try to reach, and if you're not good enough, you won't reach. Right. And she explains heaven and hell in such a simple way that we're able to apply now, that it's just like, why has no one explained this to me this way before? So she says, you know, she talks about violence and war and crime and oppression and negative self-talk and self-loathing. And I'm like, wow, that makes so much sense. And when we do the opposite and we return to love, we create our own personal heaven for ourselves. So heaven and hell is really just a mindset. Yeah. My therapist said something yesterday that I've never heard before, and I really loved, and it has to do with what you're saying. And she was just like, she's talking to me about something. She just says, on this side of heaven, and that's what she called it. And I was like, that's so, you know, because it's true. We think of heaven as this place that we have to reach for,
but it's on this side of heaven. Like we can create that for ourselves in this lifetime.
Right. I'm not saying that I know, what's on the other side, because I've never had a near-death experience, and it's not that I don't believe that there is heaven. I absolutely do. But we can also create heaven for ourselves here.
Yes, we can. And I think that one of the things you highlighted that's so important is it's so easy to highlight the hell has many mansions, like that's hell, abuse and war, but the negative self-talk warfare against ourselves.
Oppression. We can oppress ourselves. We, can commit crimes unto ourselves. It's mind-blowing.
On the page before that, she talks about, I was telling you a lot about genograms. And so genograms are this graphic illustration of a family tree where you can actually show dynamics like abuse and all these different things, and you see it visually in your family tree, not just the people but the relationships between the people in your family. And so
super cool.
It's really important to do that kind of work, but we can't use that as a crutch and be like, well, I'm this way because my mom always said this to me growing up. And she says that in the page before, and she says, maybe our moms were a little mean, but we are vicious. No one can compare to how cruel we can be to ourselves.
This book really makes you take a look at who you are. Like really do the work. Which is, I guess, why I love it so much, because my brand is all about doing the work and diving into your darkness to reach your light. So,
and getting familiar with your darkness, getting comfortable with it, because it's not like it never disappears. You can't banish it out of sight, like goodbye darkness, you no longer. It's the yin and the yang, right? We're equal parts, darkness and light. And it's about being familiar with your darkness, and on the day that your darkness shows up, knowing it, being like, hey, how you doing? What's up? What triggered you? Okay, that doesn't serve you anymore, right? Exactly. Like that mindset, whatever coping mechanism that you developed at some point in your life for whatever wound, doesn't serve you right now, mama. But after she talks about darkness, she goes into light, which is really important. And did you highlight this on page 11?
Let's see what I highlighted on page 11.
You underlined something in there. What'd you got?
On page 11, I highlighted, I felt like I'd been busted.
Yes. So I did everything before that. Wonderful paint job. New shutters, a pretty new roof, windows. Instead, he hit it with a giant wrecking ball. Sorry, honey, he seemed to say. There were cracks in the foundation, not to mention all the rats in the bedroom. I thought we better just start all over.
Which is... This book just created so many shifts in my mind and in my heart, and it's literally shaped the way that I behave today, which is crazy that a book is able to do that, but words are super powerful. And you can tell she put way more than just words into this book, which is why it's like sold so many copies all over the world.
It has a lot of soul in it. I mean, just the idea of like, and it's funny how we have different terms for things, but for me, you say that you love how she paints pictures.
Yes.
And so that picture of like, God, I just want to update my house. My life is a house. Can you just give me, some renovations?
So the thing about that, which she talks about, is God is not your errand boy. You cannot be like, God, so I have this relationship and he's super dope, but he's kind of mean, and you kind of can we just like fix him? That's not what you should be praying, how you should be praying. So she talks about, yes, you should communicate with God, but how should you be communicating with God? You should make yourself of service versus asking for things all the time. So that completely shifted my relationship with myself, but also my relationship with God.
Right.
And formed one. You know? I feel like I never had one the way that I had now back 4 years ago when I first read this. So she also says, I feel like I've been busted. Like he put a wrecking ball through the house, and she's like, honestly, if I was God, I would have busted me too. And it sat with me for a while, because I was in a situation where I was so in pain and I was so angry, and I was so full of rage about the way that I was being treated. But I'm like, hold up. How have I been treating myself this entire time? So it really forces you to like take a real look and become comfortable with your darkness.
I realized how easy it is for us, and this is all of us, to recognize where we're victims, but not acknowledge where we are what's the word I want to use? The abusers or the victimizer, I guess, right? it's easy to be like, well, he did this and that, but we don't look at what did you do?
Exactly.
How are you perpetuating that cycle? Because
exactly.
we are, if we really look into our blind spots.
Exactly. Yeah, she definitely has a gift for becoming a vessel for the things that need to be heard.
And so at the top of page 12, this line is everything. And I feel like we both had a moment that, yours might be the date you bought the book, but nervous breakdowns can be highly underrated methods of spiritual transformation. Can we talk about surrender for a second? And that's how that first chapter ends out. It talks about that's what it means to surrender to God. What does it mean to surrender to God?
I bought this book at one of my many nervous breakdowns because I had a few. But I felt like this is the one where I wanted to make a change versus me asking for, she talks about this, stop asking and just do, just be. So at this point I wanted to just do and be, but I didn't know how. So the fact that I read things like this, like nervous breakdowns can be highly underrated methods of spiritual transformation. You don't think that. You don't think that, when you're breaking, you're actually breaking through.
Right.
Right. So that was just like huge brain explosion for me and totally shifted everything.
It's shifting our mindset. So what happens for me in the past I've had many nervous breakdowns, a few things. One is that I keep repeating the same cycles. Like I was doing the same thing in different relationships. And I know a lot of people do that. And I kept doing it and I was doomed to do it. And she talks about this later in the relationships channel. The relationships chapter, where we are going to be doomed to repeat the same thing until we learn the lesson.
Exactly.
And so I was doing it over and over again. The second thing that I noticed that I do, and I think a lot of people do this, especially women, and that was that I was using self-contempt as a hiding place. And what I mean by that is when I had these nervous breakdowns, I just caved in and I was like, this is my fault. I deserve this. I'm a bad person. Or I asked for this, whatever it is. And I never thought about the fact that it's a cop-out. If I'm busy blaming myself, I can't do the work I need to do to grow.
Because you're further separating yourself from God, which is the whole point of the book.
Yes. A return to love.
You're further separating yourself, so not only can you not love yourself, but you can't even access the source of love.
Because you're also saying like I'm not worthy of that. You're so busy beating yourself. You're like I'm not no one. Like God can't look at me. No, nothing can look at me right now. I am not worthy.
And in saying that you're not worthy, you're also saying that God's not worthy.
Yes.
Ooh, multiple brain explosions. I love this book. It's like a good ass rap song. Like there's so many entendres.
all the Biggie lyrics.
I'm like, what? So like reading this a second time, I'm like, there's so many things that I didn't catch the first time or that I caught a different way. And that was definitely one of them.
As we move forward for the rest of the video, we just have to clarify that God is love. That's a foundational thing we have to set, right?
Bada bing, bada boom.
They are synonymous. If we're talking, so really a return to love
is a return to God. Is a return to yourself.
Yes. And Marianne Williamson talks about how there are two emotions that we work on, only two, and that is fear and love.
And they cannot coexist.
I believe that.
They cannot coexist. Whatever you're feeling, whether it be anger, she describes anger, she describes sadness, any negative emotion usually stems from fear. And it further, and letting yourself be in that space, even though it is healthy to some degree, and not allowing yourself to escape it is further separating you from love.
I think the problem is when you stay in a place, as opposed to like, okay, I felt that didn't feel good. And then also asking yourself, where's the fear here, right? So I feel shame, I feel guilt. What is the fear? And then you can pray to transform that fear.
Right, which is the prayer that you should be doing.
That's why meditation is so important, and say, okay, I can't do this by myself, God. And so this is what I'm realizing. This is what I'm scared of. Help me face that fear. Help me remove that fear. It's a block. Right. Remove that block from inside of me.
Right. So instead of praying for a way out, you just pray for a way to see it differently so that you can just accept what's going on and then, be able to accept the new opportunity.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to read this part. Because it really, I underlined it. Again, I grew up in a very traditional household, so this hit home for me. She's a Jewish woman. Yeah. Right? Let's talk about that. So she's a Jewish woman who picked up this book, and it had a whole bunch of Christian terms. She was like, I don't know. Puts it down. Life goes even worse than she thought it could. A year later, she's like, all right, I'm just going to pick it back up because I need to try something. And so I love when she says that some people get uncomfortable with the word Jesus or God or Christ, right? But she's like, yo, the ones that get the most uncomfortable are Christians.
Yeah.
I'm just going to read you this. So many Christian terms have been used to create and perpetuate guilt that many thinking people have decided to reject them entirely. And so for many Christian children, on the other hand, these words were charged with guilt, punishment, and fear of hell. Whereas for her, she said Jewish children don't have the same connotation. So it wasn't even as scary for her as she found it was for other maybe Christians and Catholics who were raised with that terminology. And then she just talks about by automatically rejecting Jesus based on what some traditional Christians have done with and in his name, many people have thrown out the baby with the bath water.
Which is a bar. Like, she should just be a rapper. She should just be a rapper because that's a bar. Yeah, I resonated with that so much.
Yeah.
So much as a Catholic schoolgirl. Just the feeling of guilt and shame, which is probably why I separated from a real relationship with God, because I prayed. I did pray, but I was like, what am I praying for? I'm praying for parking. I'm praying for, like, yeah, she makes you really take a look at the way you communicate as a whole. Like, how do you communicate with others? How do you communicate with yourself? How do you communicate spiritually? And makes you reassess everything.
Yeah. Someone once told me that your relationship with everyone, right? Your partner, your friends, your family, is a reflection of your relationship with God. And that...
Yeah. That checks.
I was like, oh, so like when things aren't going right, and that's what a lot of this book is. Why this book is so great is because it talks about the work you need to do. And then all of a sudden, your relationships really do start... they either start transforming or they start dropping.
Ooh. Which is what happened to me. I bought this book to make sense of my separation. And she talks about, when you really intend for everything in your life to be authentically you, for you to come back to who you really are, to remember who the fuck you are.
Right.
Everything that doesn't resonate with your truth starts to drop.
Yeah.
So it was so true for me at that time. I, lost my romantic relationship. I lost my job. I lost, so many things were going on. But this book kind of like, I don't want to say it made it all right, but
it shifted the way you saw
it. Shifted my perception.
Yeah. And that is everything. That is the difference between heaven and hell. Right. Here. We associate these Christian terminology and Jesus with that guilt and that shame, as opposed to, because people have misused it, as opposed to the love. And so it's hard. This is really difficult work because it's reprogramming and it's shedding.
It's unlearning. It's unlearning all the things that we've been taught and not taught. Because I feel like, and I don't want to offend anybody when I say this, but Christianity and Catholicism, yes, teaches about love, but more focuses on like the sacrifice, the pain, and that pain is the only thing that's going to equal love when it shouldn't be that way. Right. So we start to become so focused on the pain and on being in that negative space that some of us never reached that.
And we rationalize the pain and the suffering. Like, this is what well, Jesus went through all this.
Exactly.
And so we have to go through all this.
Exactly.
And it's like, I don't know that that's the moral of the story, guys. I don't know that was the takeaway we were supposed to get from this.
Exactly.
It becomes very dangerous. People take things literally. They pick and choose what works for them. And that's what happens a lot. Well, let's talk about it, right? Like, history in this country. That's what happened. Like, I told you, that's what was the hardest pill for me to swallow. To come back to God, to return to love. I had to make amends with the fact that people were using the Bible and using Jesus' words to enslave other people. And I was just like, nah. And then someone recently said this quote to me and it really resonated. They said, any tool can be used as a weapon if you hold it right.
Ooh! A bar. A bar. It's so true. She talks about being a miracle worker. And I never thought of like me in this entrepreneurial role as being a miracle worker. But I am, you are, like we are.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know, gives our job, our work a different definition.
It's a different purpose.
Yeah.
It's really meaningful, necessary, important work.
Yeah. She says, the world needs healing desperately, like a bird with a broken wing. People know this, and millions have prayed. God heard us. He sends help. He sent you.
Mm-hmm.
When I tell you tears,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my God, that cancels out all the imposter syndrome that, you know, my anxiety sometimes gives me. Like, oh my God, who am I?
Yeah.
And then she has a really good quote somewhere later in the book that says something along the lines of, who am I? But like, really, who am I not? You know, who am I not to accept that
Right.
role?
Right.
You know, so.
And thinking about how, and it really is the battle a lot of time is inside of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's the worst one.
Right.
No one else can do the damage that we do or block us the way that we do. And I think here's where she talks a lot about forgiveness.
Yes.
And the role that forgiveness plays in miracles and change. And she talks about how we should pray. We shouldn't pray for God to change our lives, but rather for him to change us.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the moment I started praying differently in my marriage. And so in the beginning, when I got married, I was just like, God, take Steven because he is impatient. You need to fix this. You need to fix that. And I was listing out all the
checklist.
things.
Yeah.
And then I started shifting and I started praying like, God, help me be the best wife I can be. Help me be the best partner. Help me be a better friend. Help me, change me. And miracles started taking place.
People have this perception of miracles that's so grandiose. Like, miracles are people walking for the first time after so many years, or like, miracles are small things that happen every single day.
One of the things I put on my vision board this year is make a big deal out of the little things. And I've been I've really been celebrating all these little moments, because also we don't...
The little good things.
Out of the little good things, yes.
Yes.
Because we don't pay attention, and sometimes, like, God is always talking. It's a question of, are you listening? And always working. Always working. But we be so on our phones as we're walking. You know, like, we live such microwave, like, popcorn lives. Like, I go here and I gotta do this, that we don't realize it.
Yep. She talks about forgiveness being selective remembering, which I really love, because it forces you to take a look at, well, how do I forgive people? And I was actively doing that the first time I read this book. And she talks about seeing the good versus I forgive them for being a bad person. No, you're not forgiving them for being a bad person. You're forgiving them for the things that they might have gone through in their childhood that resulted in the way that they're behaving as an adult. So it forces you to, like, I've been saying this whole video, but like, it really does force you to take a look at, you know, how you're communicating with yourself and how you're really spreading love. Like, how are you loving and how are you not?
She says that because language is so important. She says that later in the relationship chapter, when she's talking about, it's like a cop-out. We use cop-outs with our language. So we're like, I forgive that person for being a bad person. Or so later in the chapter, something that people say all the time is, I just choose the wrong people.
Right. I choose the wrong people, and it's just like, no. Or I attract the wrong people. No, you don't attract the wrong people. You're attracted to, you know, a certain type of person. And
you gotta dig into that darkness.
Right. And why? Why is that?
My favorite, bars, she does have bars. My favorite part when she says, the problem is not that you met this person. The problem is that you gave them your phone number.
Exactly.
You knew. We always know.
You knew what it was when you signed up. Bars. This lady has bars, I'm telling you.
Yo, you knew. The analogies she uses are fantastic. I think that's what she does so well. So we're talking about... This chapter's about miracles, right? And she says, so before she said we're like a house and God just breaks down the house because you need a new foundation. Now she's like, God is like electricity. A house can be wired for it, but if there aren't any light fixtures, what good does it do? If God is seen as electricity, then we are the lamps. It doesn't matter who we are or what our gifts are. All that matters is that we are willing to be used in his service. This
is actually, I took that and I ran with it. She actually uses that analogy during all her talks. And of course, I've watched most of them because I'm a psycho. So that's why I've coined that little light bulb. If you go to my Instagram, you see a little light bulb emoji on all my captions and in my Instagram profile, because it's a reminder to me of my job. Like, this is my job, is to be a lamp and to inspire you and her and him and everybody who watches me or reads anything that I write to turn their light on or to even connect themselves.
Right. Because we are lamps. We don't stop being lamps. We're just not always plugged into the source.
Exactly. And then people are like, why am I so sad? Why am I so angry? Why am I so, why can't I find anyone to love me? And I'm like, well, you're not plugged in. So I really this book has literally shifted everything for me and created my career.
Wow.
That's why I love this book so much. I think, and I came to terms with that during the second reading, that wow, this literally created everything for me. This is why I am who I am. And of course I read a million books after this, but I read this at a time where I knew nothing, or I did know, but I'd forgotten.
Yeah.
So this book literally reminded me of who I was and made me return to love. That's so corny, but it's so true.
No, but it's true.
It's so true.
It's true. Okay, so what I'm thinking about now in my head, and I kind of want to throw the picture up there, is the picture when we first announced that we were going to do this buddy read. Did you hashtag Books That Elevate? Is that maybe I hashtagged it? I said I was going to start a hashtag because of that picture. Books That Elevate, because you're crisscross and floating.
I was low-key meditating, reading the book. But that's literally how this book makes me feel.
Right.
So I made sure to read and finish this book in the exact same spot where I took that picture to give it meaning. I'm so corny like that. But yeah, I think that is why I love it so much. Just some of the things that she says, all the things that she says in here, even though it does have its dry spots.
Yeah.
Which we can definitely go over.
Like anything, it's life, right? Oh man, this was so big for me. So she talks about how lack of love is always the problem. But often, and I hear this a lot, what I love is I feel like she counters these arguments that people have against faith all the time.
Yep.
And they see faith as a weakness when really faith is visionary, and she says this, right? And we all have faith. We either have faith in fear or we have faith in love.
Ooh.
And so she talks about, and I hear this all the time, well, if God exists, why is there world hunger? And why are there hurricanes? And the question is not, she says this, what kind of God would let children starve? But rather, what kind of people let children starve? Every system in the world, socially, politically, economically, biologically, is beginning to crumble under the weight of its own cruelty. So we want to blame God for starving children, but we're not going to talk about capitalism?
Right.
Because there's enough food in the world to feed everybody.
And again, she highlights miracle workers, that our job is not to fix world hunger, but to remind people how to fix themselves so that world hunger doesn't exist anymore.
Right. It's
so that war doesn't happen. Which is why I feel like our generation is doing it, okay? We're the one. We are. Millennials get a lot of slack for being shitty, which many of us are, but we're also doing a lot of work to reverse all these things that have come with us generation after generation.
Yeah, we're breaking cycles.
We are all miracle workers, and I feel like this book highlights that for everybody. So it's not just meant for people who are working in spirituality or educators or counselors, but everyone. It's everybody's job to love and to be loved and to keep spreading it, because that's literally the only cure.
That's what I believe. All right. So that was, unless you have more to add, we covered principles. So now we have to get into practice. Oh, it's my favorite chapter.
And that's when it gets crazy.